As OK Going Whitesnake would say, here we go again. I was on the fence as to whether or not I should talk about this, but because the last video performed oh so surprisingly well, I said, you know what the fuck. So Nintendo, literally under a week from discontinuing the NES Classic Edition, they are reportedly working on an SNES Mini, or Super Nintendo Entertainment Console Classic Edition, due out by the holiday season this year. Here is our time to act, because we saw the significant problems that happened with the NES Classic Edition. Everybody wanted one, people loved it, but it had some issues. One, that the cable between the controller and the console I heard was super short, but I think the most glaring problem was the fact that you couldn't even find a fucking one wherever you went. You went to Best Buy, you tried on Amazon, they were scarce, completely scarce, and they were released under limited quantities. And literally within a few waves of stock that were kind of secretly given out, like you had to be on the lookout to see if your favorite or preferred retailer had any in stock. And it was just so frustrating that people like myself just fucking gave up. As much as we would have loved to have owned an NES Classic, we just couldn't get our hands on one. And the amount of money that scalpers were just raising through the roof so you can get one guaranteed, it was just ridiculous. Okay, ridiculous. I don't know what's more ridiculous, the fact that they were charging that much price, or the fact that people were actually forking over the money to get it. Like, I had comments in the past couple of videos talking about the NES Classic Mini Edition, whether it be through the scarcity of the quantities or the last video where I talked about it being discontinued. People were telling me you should have bought one when you had the chance. You should, and some would say you should have bought one when it was $200. I'm like, no, because that's not the list price. That's exactly what they want you to do. And now is our moment to act and to speak with our wallets with the SNES Mini. Personally, I feel like we shouldn't buy it, and I'm encouraging you to not cave in and buy it as much as you will love it. It's a little easier for me because personally I didn't grow up with the Super Nintendo. It was all about the classic NES, and then I jumped right directly over to the N64 from that point. So guilty as charged. If they do release an N64 Mini Edition next year, considering that this might actually prove to be a trend, I might actually try to get myself on one, but no more than the listed price that Nintendo has going for it, because that's just ridiculous, and that just emboldens scalpers to continue to do this bullshit. But I know that an awful lot of other people will. And those people are going to be the ones that are super stoked beyond their minds right now, knowing that Nintendo is currently working on an SNES. But personally, I feel like they need to take a step back so that we can actually have Nintendo hear us. Because trust me, they're gonna do this shit again. They're gonna do it again. They're gonna release a limited amount of quantities that first release day. They're gonna be gone within a span of seconds, and then eventually they'll continue those secret waves of stock where you don't even know where they come from. And then by the time that it comes and goes, they're gonna discontinue it, and then not only push the Nintendo Switch even further. Hopefully they can support the system even more with some more third-party support and bring some better games for that. But on the backside, they'll probably start working on an N64, and I think at that point they'll cut it off, because I can't see them creating some kind of classic edition for the GameCube. But for the N64, that's where they're gonna double down on their money. And as much as I would love to get myself an N64 Classic, should that ever come about, considering that now the SNES is becoming a reality, they have to realize that Nintendo is going to get worse with this. They're going to get worse, because the more you have those stocks run out, they notice this. They notice the numbers. They notice that all these retailers are out of stock out of the NES Classic back when it came out, or now this. And also, take into consideration how quickly they're pumping these things out. That's because they take emulations, put them in a chip, and then put the chip in a casing that resembles that original console that you grew up with and that you love so much, and then put it out there, and that's what you're spending the money on. And again, the price that they're putting on these things is actually not that bad. $60, and I'm assuming that this one's going to be around the same price range. That's cool. It's just the scarcity of it that just feels very... It feels like they're preying on the whole nostalgia factor way too much. It's different to play to nostalgia within a movie or a game because it's all aesthetics. Here, they're using it to monetary gain, and sure, in my last video I said, oh yeah, Nintendo hates money. Here, they're going to be able to grab some more money, but at the same time, they noticed their strategic plan. They noticed their game plan, and they're just going to keep repeating it because we're caving into it. But here, we're being given a second chance, and I feel like that now, if we vote with our wallets and speak out by not buying this thing at all, I think Nintendo will realize that, okay, maybe if we can implement some kind of change in their strategic plan, maybe we don't have them run out completely out of stock, then maybe they'll be forced to put out some more leftovers that they have, some leftover stock, put it out there, and then boom, that's when we can lead our plan of attack and maybe actually buy some of these things. I don't know. I'm not an expert at this. I don't know what it would take for Nintendo to change their strategy and be able to work something out with us consumers so that we're able to all win. They get all their money at the same time. We are able to be confident to walk into a store, to walk into a Best Buy, and be able to pick up an SNES Mini or a Nintendo 64 Classic Edition, which I would very much love. But if this whole strategy keeps repeating, because trust me, I'm going to be keeping my eye out on the SNES Mini closely. Not because I want to buy it, but I'm just going to keep checking and seeing how long will it take amongst release day. Like literally hours, days, minutes even, for this thing to run out of stock. And so for Nintendo to just keep on smiling as they see the money bags just constantly coming in, and then the scalpers will get all that much more power hungry because hey, now they got a limited stock of the SNES. Now they can rack up their prices. And again, it breaks my heart to see how many people were posting in the comments saying that they forked over like $100 and something, $200 for an NES Classic Edition. Guys, don't, please, I beg of you, do not do this. Do not repeat the same mistake with the SNES. Please give it time so that the waters can settle and see what Nintendo's next move is going to be for these emulations they're packing forward. Speaking of emulations, I feel like I'm going to get myself into the emulation game myself, because if I ever want to revisit these games, that's exactly where I'm going to go. In my last video, people were talking about like, why just get an emulator? I'm not against emulators. I would love to emulate on my console and be able to play those games because it doesn't take up that much space, it doesn't take up that much power. It's just the ethics of it all. It's the ethical nature of how Nintendo is playing us. That's what I was talking about in the video, not about why it is that I prefer to do this rather than this. I understand that there's controllers that you could hook up to the PC. I know this. I know all this. I probably should have mentioned in the video, but I know all this. It's just, why is it so hard for Nintendo to keep true to their fan base? Not just with the limited quantities of these classic novelty items, but just basic overall needs for games, whether it be able to buy a certain accessory for a system, whether it be a controller or an amiibo, or even being able to port over gameplay footage onto your YouTube channel without getting a fucking copyright strike. And the gaming community should not be fucked with, because we have a voice and we're able to use that voice to make things happen. Because how many games, how many sequels? We got Battlefront 2 coming out later this year, and it's getting a campaign. Why? Because we all talked about wanting a campaign for that original game, and it looks like they're listening. Looks. That has yet to be seen. But our voice can make a difference within games. We can be loud enough for them to hear, because after all, we're the ones that are giving them their money. So if we talk about the thing that talks to them the most, which is that money, we can make a difference. And I feel like Nintendo still has time. I still have faith in Nintendo that they can turn themselves around and become the company that we grew up with and we love, if we sit them down, have an intervention, and in the form of that intervention, we speak with our wallets. Other than that, I really can't comment on what I would love to see on the SNES Mini, because again, I didn't grow up with the SNES. If anything, I just want the bare essential Super Mario games like Super Mario World, Super Mario 3. I think that's came out on the SNES. Oh, I think it was like a crossover between NES and SNES. But Super Mario World, the Legend of Zelda games that I missed out on, I think there were a couple of Castlevania games on there, Mario Karts, one of the was there a Star Fox game there, or did we just jump over to Star Fox 64? Again, I know very, very little about the SNES because I wasn't attached to it as much as everybody else was, but once we get to the N64, oh, shit's about to go down. So please let me know in the comments what you guys think of the recent news that Nintendo is currently working on a classic edition of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Are you excited, or are you very, very, very cautious about what Nintendo has in store for us in terms of these emulators being packed away in these shells that really brings us memories of the good old times? And that is why we're forking over their money to either Nintendo directly or to the scalpers, because Lord only knows how many of these things are going to be pumped out later this year. Do any of you think that Nintendo is capable of changing their ways with the amount of quantities that they're going to release of this thing? Do you think that they're going to learned from their past mistakes with the NES Classic Edition, or do you think that they're just too stubborn to be able to help at this point? Please let me know all of your feedback in the comments below. And before I move on, would you be willing to purchase one of these things, and what games do you want to see on it? Because right now, this whole news about them working on one is just a little bit above it being a rumor, and not so much a confirmed thing that it's definitely happening with a price point and a release date, and let alone the games that are loaded onto it. So please, if you grew up with the SNES, the original version, let me know in the comments what you would love to see being packed into this thing. And of course, you already know the deal. If you like the video, please make sure to show it by hitting the thumbs up button down below, as well as sharing the video with anybody else who has heard about the SNES Classic Edition and whether or not they're going to be purchasing one. And of course, for more rants, crazy discussions, as well as reviews on all things nerdy, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Until next time, guys, make sure to follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at DarkSpiderDavid, and take very good care of yourselves.